It's time to talk about your money here on GMQC at 11. Most of us are focused on getting our next paycheck, but once that deposit goes into your bank account, doesn't matter where you keep your money. Joining us to help us sort through this is Dave Elizondo and Drue Kampmann from True Financial Partners in Bettendorf. Good morning, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Nice seeing you.
So let's get straight into it. How important is the type of account you use when it comes to our financial future? I know there's a lot of different accounts you can use.
There are a lot of different types of accounts you can use, and I'll give you an example. You can set up an individual account, a joint account, an IRA account, a custodial account, a trust account, a 403B account, 401k account, and on and on and on. And all of these different types of accounts have different features and benefits. Some are tax deferred, some are tax free, and some are fully taxable. And as complex as it is, you need to find out ahead of time what the features and benefits are of the different accounts, because that, if you pick the right account, it's going to help you better achieve your goals over the long run. Very important.
And really define the purpose of what that money is for, right? Every dollar you earn, there's a definition or a definition of why or where you're going to put those dollars. So you have to define what the purpose of that money is.
Yeah, and some of those accounts you set up are short term and some are longer term. Some are just specifically retirement accounts for the long term. So there's a lot of different features and benefits, a lot of different types of accounts, and it's really important to pick the right ones.
And there is a lot to choose from.
Right? Lots of tools.
Yeah. And how much money should someone keep in their savings account, and what about their checking accounts?
There's really a good rule of thumb. When you look at your checking account, you look at your savings account, define the purpose of what those accounts are. One is short-term transactional, which is your checking account. Then your savings account is really for something in the midterm, maybe a need or emergency fund that you have. And usually checking accounts don't have a lot of return, meaning their interest is very low. So usually you want to keep maybe 2 months worth of monthly expenses in your checking account. Beyond that, you should put maybe 3 to 6 months in a savings account for the purposes of that emergency that arises, or a need or unemployment. You know, those are emergency needs that you have. So really, transactional is checking, savings would be a little bit higher rate of return also.
Yeah, and the risk on that is some people keep too much in their checking and savings. And because they oftentimes don't pay any interest on those accounts, your money's not working hard. So you want to make sure that you don't put too much money in those accounts.
And would you say, because I know everyone makes different amount of money, there's a lot of times I hear that you should put a certain percentage of your paycheck in a savings account. Would you agree with that?
Sure. I think you have to, like Dave just mentioned, all these different types of accounts. You have to define the purpose of every dollar you earn. Some for long term, some for short term. You always want to focus on the emergency needs that you might have, but you also want to focus on the long term, because return on your money over the long term is going to, more time in the market as far as investing, it's going to return you or give you a greater return over the long run.
Yeah, and a perfect example of that is COVID. We just went through COVID a couple of years ago, and there are a lot of people that were unemployed for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So you want to make certain that you have enough money on the emergency side, liquid money that you can get your hands on in case something like that happens.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And what should you look for in a deposit account when it comes to fees, interest rates, and accessibility?
That's a great question as well. And there are 4 questions that everybody should ask when they're setting up any type of an account. And the first one is, what are the fees and the costs associated? Are there fees or costs associated? And if so, are they one-time upfront or are they ongoing? And then the second question is, what is the accessibility of my account? Am I going to have access to my money whenever I want it, or am I going to lock it up? And if I'm going to lock it up or commit it, for what period of time is that money locked up? And then the next one is rate of return or interest rate. What kind of interest rate or rate of return can I expect on my account here? And then the fourth one, real important, is risk. How much risk am I taking with this account? Is there a little bit of risk, no risk? There's always some type of risk. You're going to need to learn that ahead of time, because when it comes to fees, accessibility, rate of return, and risk, you want to know those up front, because otherwise you might find out later and you're probably not going to like what you hear.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Right.
Yeah.
And if someone has the choice to pay off debt or put money in a savings account, what should they choose?
It's a great question, and I think a lot of Americans struggle with that question financially, because a lot of times I think you put a focus in one way or the other. But let me give you an example. I think there should be a good balance between the two. But I could give you 2 scenarios where it makes sense one against the other. For example, scenario 1, let's say you have high interest rate debt like credit cards, but you've done a good job saving for that emergency or in your retirement accounts. It might make sense to put a greater focus on paying off that higher debt, because it's a greater expense that might free up more funds in your budget that's going to help you put more money towards retirement. Second scenario would be, let's say you have low interest rate debt, but you haven't accumulated a lot in savings or in retirement, so it might make more sense to put a greater focus in savings in a retirement account or an emergency fund, because everybody needs to have those in order. So everybody's situation is different, but I think it makes a lot of sense to have a balance. But think about what those costs are when your interest rate on those debts are.
So know your priorities before you go in.
Yep.
Right.
And
your objectives.
And everybody has a different financial situation. So what we're given is general advice, but it's important to look at your own unique situation.
All right, well, Dave and Drew, thank you so much for joining us here today, and we will be right back.